Hello, everyone. Welcome to assignment 6, where we are calculating total annual cost and EOQ. So for the quiz, I had my setup here where I laid out my demand, my setup cost, holding costs, and unit costs so I could calculate EOQ and TAC. So we have a demand of 24 million. Our setup cost is 5,500, which is the $5,000 fixed cost plus the clerical cost of $500. Then we have a holding cost of $2, which is our holding rate times our unit cost. And then we have the rate again here and our unit cost, which we pulled from here, plus 10 cents variable cost. So then that gives us a total EOQ of 114,000 as we saw in the quiz. And then I calculated our total annual cost, which is of north of $25 million. So then, moving on to the first question in the assignment. Cost per unit used to be $10, but now it is $11. How does that affect our EOQ and our TAC? So what's going to be affected is our variable H. Before it was 20% times $10.10, but now it's $11.10, which increases our variable H, our holding cost, to $2.22. So I embedded that in the formula and it gave us a economic order quantity of $109,000. So it has decreased from our first example, but it had an inverse effect and our total annual cost, which is just our material cost, ordering cost, and holding cost altogether, increased now to $27 million. So moving on to the next prompt, our holding rate rises to 25%. Once again, I carried the formula down and I just changed 20 to 25%, and it changed our variable H once again further to 2.775. So it is going to increase again, and our EOQ is going to further decrease from what we had before. And as we saw, it has an inverse relationship, and our TAC, our total annual cost, is going to increase slightly, this one to closer to $27 million. So now moving on to our third prompt, which is our fixed shipping cost is going to increase to $6,500, which is ultimately going to affect our variable S, our setup cost. So I added $500 to $6,500 because $500 is our clerical cost, and that is going to happen every time we set up. And now we are affecting the numerator instead of the denominator, and our EOQ is actually going to increase. It has a total opposite effect of what's happening here. And our total annual cost is actually going to decrease. So we still see an inverse effect between the two, but now the opposite is happening from what happened before. And that is likely due to because as our fixed cost is increasing, we're going to have to produce more units to cover our total fixed costs. And as our units increase, our fixed cost is going to decrease, which is going to decrease our total annual cost. So now, what happens when our variable costs double? So this one I wasn't sure exactly where to put it, but I was assuming that it meant that our 10 cents now turned into 20 cents per unit, which I tacked on to our unit cost. So before our unit cost was $11.10, and all I changed was the fact that our C is now $11.20. Everything else is going to stay the same, but our variable H is being affected by this because H times C is our capital H, our holding rate times our unit cost. Now we see once again our EOQ is going back down like we saw in the first two examples, and our total annual cost increases. So once again, that inverse effect. So what happens if our clerical costs drop by $300? Our clerical cost used to be $500, and the question asks what would happen if we dropped it down to $200. So carry this formula down, but what's changing, I just took this previous setup cost and I subtracted $300 from it. So our numerator is now changing, and that is going to decrease our EOQ, just how we saw in here when our numerator increased. So now our EOQ decreased to $107,000. And what's different about what's happening here is there's no inverse effect, and our total annual cost is actually decreasing along with our economic order quantity. And that's what happens when our clerical cost drops. And that is assignment 6. Thank you for watching.